I'm so terrified of my abusive husband and son that I am abandoning them the second he turns 18, filing for divorce, and starting over because they were never family to me. I, 35F, have a son, 18M, and a husband, 45M, who I'm attempting to divorce. I met my husband when I was 16 at the church in my hometown. At 17 he invited me over, and I don't remember it well, but we ended up sleeping together. I was supposed to be cleaning his house for some extra pocket change but ended up pregnant. I still can't remember everything that happened, but when my parents found out they confronted him and made me marry him. I had my son not much longer after that. My husband's a brute, he was always mean to me. I tried my best to make him happy. I'd cook his favorite foods, clean the house extra nice, do childcare work to make a few dollars to buy him a treat or two, but if I made one mistake he didn't like, he'd hit me. I used to cry to my father about it, but he'd tell me it's my punishment for having premarital intercourse. I'd ask my father what my husband's punishment was and he'd say his punishment is having to settle for you. I don't think I ever recovered from that. Before anyone asks about my mother has always been kind of out of it. She's been on medication since I was a child and she's kind of like a zombie. She doesn't talk much or do much of anything unless my father says so. She was different when I was little, but I hardly remember those days. The hitting got worse. To the point where I wasn't really allowed to leave the house, or if I did I had to wear makeup or else my husband would think I was trying to get him in trouble. My son grew up watching this. I've heard stories of kids hating their abusive fathers, but my son loved his father more than he loved me. I never wanted my son to hate his father, but he started acting out and eventually he started laying hands on me. My son started hitting me when he was 10. It was light and I'd tell him to stop, but as he got older he started beating me. If I told him no, he'd beat me. If I didn't do something he wanted, he'd slap or kick me and even punch me. And my husband would back him up a lot of the times. He'd say he's just learning to be a man. He'll stop when he's older and has his own wife. It got to the point where I was terrified of my baby. The only thing in this world I ever got to make, and he terrified me. When he was 16 he broke my arm really bad because I showed my husband his report card. My husband disciplined him but never told me how. I grew to hate my son so much every day, but I still tried to be good to him, to help him. He didn't want that. I couldn't make him want that. I couldn't sleep or eat without dreaming of my son and husband hurting me. My son once pinned me on the ground because I had asked him to help me lift something. I'm frail so I can't lift much. When he pinned me he hit me a lot and I could feel it. Hurting me aroused him. He humped me for a few seconds and then he started screaming at me saying it was all my fault and locked himself in his room. I didn't tell my husband. I should have, but somehow I felt like I would have just gotten hurt worse either by my sons or my husband. He was 17 when this happened, so last year. After his 18th in January I packed a bag and wandered off into the night. I don't have friends, my father wouldn't help me even if I told him these things. I slept on a park bench and went to the library and looked up a woman's shelter. I worked really hard and got a studio apartment. I don't know how, but my son found me. He spent hours at my door knocking and crying for me, calling me mama. He hadn't called me that in years. I was terrified he'd break the door down and drags me back to the house, but my neighbors made him leave. My son has somehow gotten my number and now he, my husband and father, and some of my son's friends are texting me and calling me horrible names. My son says I'm a bad mother for running away and not loving him the way he loves me. My husband says he won't grant me a divorce and that he'll take whatever I have right now, that I've failed as a woman. My father says I'll die alone because I'm a bad woman. My father even got my mother on the phone to speak to me. She's all pilled out though, so I shouldn't take her words to heart, but she says that a woman can never abandon her child no matter how painful life gets. She told me when my father hurt her she never left me, so I was a coward and a failure, you leaving my son. She said she could forgive divorce but not leaving my baby behind, so am I really a jerk here? Update 1. Later that day. I've been reading a lot of comments and I'm grateful and very overwhelmed. I won't get too specific, but I just packed an essentials bag and have purchased a ticket for out of town. I got off the phone with a shelter a few thousand miles away and they're willing to get me once in a ride in their city. I'll figure out divorces and restraining orders once I'm finally there. Until then I'll read comments to see if there are any more useful things to learn. Luckily my studio is on a month-to-month lease because I had never really planned on making this a permanent home. So leaving is as hard as I thought. Running away the first time was hard, but maybe the second time would be easier? Update 2. 1 day later. Here's a small update, and I likely won't update again due to being nervous about everything, but I'm on a bus. I got on this morning and I'm about 5 hours away from the state, and then I'll be getting on a plane. I had enough money for a ticket, so I'll be super far away. I won't work on the divorce until a few months from now and I have a small job lined up. It's nothing special, just a 12-hour fast food gig. I'm grateful for all the advice. My old landlord was sorry to see me go, but I paid off this month's rent and told him he can sell the little bit of furniture I had. He said he'd give me half of that money once it's all sold. He's very kind, a little scary looking, but when I spoke to him over the phone after I had left he was very understanding. Thank you all for everything, and I'm sorry, but this is the last thing anyone will hear from me unless I work up the nerve to update again. You are all incredibly wonderful and special people to me.